For the latest The Gifted news updates, visit hybridnetworkyt.com. Hey guys, it's Tim coming at you with a brand new The Gifted related video for this week. So in my last video, when I went over what we knew about The Gifted, I talked about the fact that it's going to have a fairly loose connection to the rest of the X-Men universe. But, just for the sake of speculation, I'm going to look at the overarching timeline of the X-Men movies, as convoluted as it is, and try to find where it best fits in. So the events of the X-Men universe up to 1973 are basically the same as one another, since that's the point in time where the timeline diverges. And these events include the flashback portions of XMen Apocalypse, pretty much the entirety of X-Men Origins Wolverine, though its position in the timeline is sketchy at best since they seem to go back and forth on whether or not it's actually part of it, seeing as they flashed back to it during X-Men Days of Future Past, but really don't reference that it happened too often. And of course, the events of X-Men First Class. Like I said, 1973 is the point where the timeline diverges, because that's when Wolverine is sent back mentally to the past in order to prevent the events that lead to the apocalyptic future that was led to in the original film franchise. In the original timeline, in 1986, Jean Grey is visited by Charles Xavier and Eric Lenshier in order to get her to join the Xavier Institute. In 1996, Warren Worthington III's angel abilities first start to manifest, as well as the first mutant cure failing and causing mad cow disease. Due to the fact that the events of X-Men 1 and X2 X-Men United happen within a few months of each other, and the fact that X-Men The Last Stand is set in the year 2006, that means that X-Men and X2 have to have taken place in the year 2003. 2011 is when the Sentinels first start attacking more so in force, and the first notable mutant that they kill is Angel. 2013 is the events of The Wolverine, as well as Boulevard Trask's announcement of the Sentinel Mark X program. 2015 is when Professor X and Magneto meet Wolverine at the airport from the post-credit scene of The Wolverine, as well as the year that Beast is killed by mutant protesters. And 2023 is the events of Days of Future Past in the future, prior to the alteration caused by sending Wolverine's consciousness back to the past. This effectively ends the original timeline and begins the revised timeline, which causes a lot of alterations to what had been previously established. This so far encompasses the 1973 portions of Days of Future Past, as well as the entirety of XMen Apocalypse, outside of the flashback segments to Ancient Egypt. Some notable alterations here are that Jean Grey and Angel were both born significantly earlier than they were in the original timeline, as well as Jean activating her Phoenix powers first in 1983 as opposed to 2003 like in the original timeline. Another change is that the events of X-Men Origins Wolverine are altered so that the means by which Logan is captured by William Stryker is changed. And the last concrete thing that happened in this timeline is that now in 2023, instead of all the X-Men dying to the Sentinels, they're now all fine at the X-Mansion. The events of Deadpool and Logan might fit into this timeline too, but they're sketchy at best as to whether they're hard locked into this timeline or just set as their own standalone films. Granted, even in both timelines, there are still huge continuity flubs all around, like the fact that no one ages throughout decades in the revised timeline, and the means by which people met each other are changed in the past than they were how they were described in later films. For example, Charles said he met Eric when he was 17, but they met when they were in their 30s in First Class. And that's a film that's supposed to take place in both timelines. So, it's wonky no matter how you look at it, but that's just a general breakdown of the order of events. But where does Gifted fit in? And is it in the original timeline or the revised timeline? Well, keep in mind that in Days of Future Past, after Mystique saved the President, they discontinued the Sentinel Project. But as we see in The Gifted, Sentinels are still around, but in a different form. Which means one of two things. This series either takes place in the original timeline, and this is part of the original Sentinel program that eventually leads to Days of Future Past, meaning that it would fall in roughly in 2017-2018 of that year, or it means that in 2017-2018, however long the series lasts in the revised timeline, the Sentinel Project is found and started to be rebuilt by a government agency. Which would explain why the Sentinels are so different here than they were in the movies, so it's really the side that I lean more towards where it is in the timeline. Plus the fact that according to the original timeline, 2013 is when those shape-shifting Sentinels that we saw in Days of Future Past were initially launched, and the Sentinels we see here aren't anything like that. So likely this takes place in the revised timeline in the year that it takes place. So this would be set between the events of where the movies are right now, which would likely be in the 90s for Dark Phoenix, and 2023, the events we see at the end of Days of Future Past in the revised timeline. But that's just the best approximation of where the Gifted takes place in either X-Men timeline. But what do you guys think? Which timeline do you think that the Gifted falls into? Well, as always, let us know down in the comments. And if you want to hear more Marvel-related videos, feel free to click that subscribe button and the bell next to it to be immediately informed whenever a new video goes up. But until next time, this has been Tim from the Hybrid Network, signing out.